This week in Pediatric Oncology, the podcast exploring hot topics and exciting advances in childhood cancer. TWiPO is produced by Solving Kids Cancer, nonprofits located in New York and London dedicated to improving research and supporting families, because every kid deserves to grow up. Subscribe to TWiPO through your favorite podcast platform.
This week in Pediatric Oncology, the podcast about new advances for childhood cancer. Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 105, recorded on November 10th, 2022. I'm your co-host, Tim Cripe from Nationwide Children's Hospital here in Columbus, Ohio, affiliated with The Ohio State University. And I am along here with a special co-host from Solving Kids Cancer, Donna Ludwinski. Welcome, Donna.
Thank you, Tim. Glad to be here.
For those of you expecting Brenda, she sends her regrets, couldn't make it on today. And in fact, I think one of the next ones, I won't be able to make it on, so she'll be without me at that time. So we'll manage without Brenda today, but hopefully we'll do fine. So Don and I are here today with a special guest, Anne Graham from MIB Agents. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you. So happy to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Well, I know you're a podcast aficionado, so we appreciate your being on and lending your expertise and sharing with us your background, your history, your goals, what you're doing. And we're going to pick your brains a little bit over the next 20 to 30 minutes. And so we appreciate that. So you're the founding executive director of MIB Agents. You're a board member of SARC. You're on a number of different other panels, alliances, groups, Accelerate. You're involved in a lot of different advocacy. So we appreciate all the work you've been doing for the pediatric cancer community for many years now. But why don't we just start by having you tell us your story, which I know you've probably recounted many, many times, but it'll just set up, the rest of the discussion.
Yeah. So I was, it was 2010. I was training for a marathon and my leg hurt, and it hurt a lot. So I went to my sports medicine doctor, who diagnosed me as being 43 and a runner, and sent me home, said, listen, you're 43, your leg's going to hurt. Just, maybe slow down on training a little bit, use a roller, kind of what you would think you would kind of get diagnosed with, which is why it took me a month or so of a lot of pain to go in and seek treatment, because I was kind of thinking the same thing. My knee's tired of me running on it. So really kept hurting. It was just increasing in pain. So I went back pretty much every month for 9 months, misdiagnosed with everything from your IT band's too tight, compartment syndrome, stress fracture, you name it, I had it, but I didn't really have any of it. So at 9 months, I got out of bed after a particularly busy work weekend, and I couldn't put any weight on my leg, that whole leg. So I had crutches, because at that point my diagnosis was a stress fracture. Put my boot on, got my crutches, and crutched into the office without an appointment. And I said, okay, it's time for an MRI. And she said, Mom, I don't know. And I said, okay, no, we're done. I need an MRI like today, which is entirely out of character for me to go to demand anything. But I was in so much pain. So she relented. I had an MRI that day. And I was in and out of that MRI machine for 3.5 hours, because they would call, it was a community hospital in upstate New York, calling in different experts. So at one point I looked back, at the control room, and there was like 8 people in there. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is the machine broken? What's happening? So when I came out, finally they released me from the beast, and I, was leaving, and the MRI tech put his hand on my shoulder and said, okay, you need to go see your doctor. And it's like 6:30 at night at this point. And I said, okay, yeah, got it. I'll make an appointment. And he goes, no, she's waiting for you now. And I was like, what? But it's 6:30. The office is closed. And he goes, just go see her. So it was across town, went over, walked into her office. Her back was to me, but the screen was facing the door. And she didn't see me or hear me hobbling in on my crutches. And I went, that's cancer. That's cancer. Is that my leg? Because that's cancer. And she goes, well, and I just left. I couldn't even sort of comprehend what was happening. So happily, she knew enough to send me to another center to be diagnosed, and ultimately ended up at Sloan Kettering and had a open biopsy, had the diagnosis, was admitted, and started treatment like 2 days later. And age notwithstanding, I was treated in the Pediatric Cancer Center at Sloan Kettering as the only grown-up.
So it sounds like from the very beginning, you were an advocate. You had to advocate for yourself very strongly against the medical system in order to get diagnosed.
It was also fair enough. At 43 years old, you don't look at somebody with a sore leg who's running at 43 and go osteosarcoma. So the doctors at Sloan Kettering started calling me the zebra. After the old adage, if you first hear horses, don't first assume zebras, assume horses. Or you hear galloping coming down the hall, assume horses, not zebras. So I became the zebra. And I have to say, once I was at a sarcoma center, there was I had no need to advocate anymore. It was like floating down a river. Okay, we're going to send you here. Now we're going to send you here. Now we're going to send, and it was like everybody was on their game, and I received excellent care.
So what was it like then as a grown-up, child's world?
Very informative, awe-inspiring, inspiring. And it's overused to say inspiring in pediatric cancer. Just because somebody's really sick, you go, oh gosh, I don't have it that bad, so I'm inspired, is kind of the subtext of that. It wasn't because of that. And honestly, I did not know how I felt about being treated in pediatrics at first, until sort of about halfway through. The treatment wasn't going so well, and they were having to add new chemotherapies. And we have 3 daughters, and I said, I can't be in New York City for 2 weeks out of every month. Can I have some of this treatment at home? So I had a week of treatment at home and a week of treatment at Sloan Kettering. So I was pretty excited. I was going to be treated with adults, and I was like, this is going to be great. I get to be with the grownups. And I went in at 8 a.m. By 10 a.m., I called my nurse over and I said, I'm crashing here. I can't. I'm crashing. Like, everybody here is talking about dying and death and who has it worse. And I was crashing. I was like, I can't do this. It was like almost a competition on who had it worse. And I couldn't wait to go back to pediatrics, because the kids in pediatrics never talked about cancer. They never talked about cancer. They talked about friends and music and sports and anything else but cancer. So after being treated in an adult cancer center, I knew exactly how I felt about being treated in pediatrics.
Well, we can really learn from the kids, it sounds like.
Yeah, I did as much as I could. As much as I could, I learned from the kids.
So you got through treatment, and then at some point you made it a life's mission. Or tell us about that sort of transition, or how you sort of came to that point.
Not that many people ask me that, Dr. Cripe. So I'll give you the truth. What happened was, like I said, the treatment wasn't going that well. My necrosis wasn't so great. So I asked my doctor, okay, so what's next? Like, if this doesn't work, what are we going to do? What's the next thing? Like, let's gear up. Like, I'm gearing up for battle here. What are we going to do? And he goes, this has to work. And I go, yeah, okay, yes. But what's next? And he goes, this has to work. And I said, okay, stop saying that. Like, but what's next? And he said, this is all we have for you. There's nothing beyond first-line treatment. So, wow. So I went back to my room, and I just was in despair. And I just said out loud, God, use me. Like, if I survive, just use me. So here we are.
Well, I guess you listened.
Yeah, it's kind of a tough gig sometimes, but a deal's a deal. We're doing this.
Right. You made a deal. So tell us about MIB.
So it really, I didn't start writing a business plan or anything like that right away. It was really about getting through treatment. And while I was in treatment, there was a girl that was being treated at the same time, and we were on track at the same time, like diagnosed at the same time, limb salvage same time. We finished treatment on the same day, and I heard from her mom. Her name was Alyssa, that she found a lump on her limb salvage leg, and so they were going to amputate. Subsequent to that, it wasn't going well. Clinical trial, it failed. And not long after, the mom called me and said, they're sending her home to die. And I went, no. Cause like, how am I NED? And this is a 12-year-old girl. This isn't okay. And I kept saying no to the mom, and hung up the phone from that call. And I felt like a complete idiot saying no to this mother. And so I called her back and I said, okay, can you give me 3 days in New York City and just let me just leave it with me? Because I kept imagining Alyssa, was her name, in her living room in a hospital bed with her little sister, and having that be the last space that she was in. So my friends and family created a 3-day experience for Alyssa. She was a dancer in New York City, and it was all dance related. So she, backstage, front row, Rockettes, Mary Poppins on Broadway, American Girl doll. Last night was Nutcracker. It was Christmas time, Nutcracker at Lincoln Center. And we had a great connection there, and they let her dance across the stage with one leg. She danced across the stage.
Wow.
And that was her. She died two weeks later. And so the kids that I was treated with, same kind of thing kept happening. So we kept doing these end of life missions. And at some point I got tired of doing end of life missions, and thought, okay, we've got to work on this from a different angle. This is kind of what we do here, one of the programs here, but we've got to front load this disease with more research, with legislation, with programs, with education. And so it all just sort of fell into place.
That's a perfect segue for my question for you, Anne, is how you basically approached that whole question of the research landscape. I mean, there's so much to learn about what has happened, what is happening, and what people are planning. And so how did you manage all that? That's a steep climb.
Yeah. And, God blesses fools and babies. And I was kind of both in that time, with great mentors, I suppose, good help on the scientific advisory board side. One thing I knew for sure was that being a patient is not a particularly empowering place to be. You feel at the mercy of everybody. Everybody's doing everything for you. You don't even do your own dishes anymore, or your own laundry, or make decisions. Like, everything sort of happens. And I kind of wanted to fix that, as well as fund research. So I decided on a venture capitalist approach for funding research, where if you raised or donated $5,000 or more, you got a seat at the table with the scientific advisory board to review the abstracts that came in, and you had a vote. You could discuss, ask questions, all of those things. And at the end of the meeting, everybody has a vote. We would leave that meeting with 3 finalists. And then when we got to our annual conference, our Factor conference, it was an all-in vote. So ultimately, it was a really meaningful thing, because it was empowering. We have patients there, we have families there, we have doctors and researchers there. Everybody's voting on that. The PI that is awarded the grant ultimately is awarded this grant by the entire community. And we think that's really powerful. And then subsequent to that, which we're getting ready to go to MD Anderson at the end of the month, we go to the institution halfway through, 6 months post award, and we ask the researcher, please show us what you're doing. Show us the research, what's happening. So we all get to go to the lab, look in the microscope, hear about the work that's being done, and say thank you. And we bring as many people as the lab will let us bring. Typically, that's about 20 people. And it's the patients, patient families. And it's really powerful. It's meaningful.
Well, backing up a little bit, how did you actually reach this community? How did you actually, because as far as I know, you're the first one who's actually, kind of aggregated or, kind of got some, collaboration going and community going. So tell us how you did that. How did that happen?
Yeah. Well, I was I was a part of the community because I was a patient. So, I knew the moms, I knew the kids, I knew the patients. I had such excellent doctors, Dr. Myers at Dr. Paul Myers, Dr. John Healy. So how it started was the conference. And how that started was I was on Capitol Hill asking for co-sponsorships for the STAR Act. And we're kind of, again, like sort of a zebra because Vermont is such a small state and they really needed the support of like Patrick Leahy and Bernie Sanders and, kind of the big dogs. So I was asked to come down, like, we need Vermont represented here. So I went down. At the end of that day, I knew that even though I was successful and the STAR Act was going to be successful, we got the co-sponsorships and all of that. I still was feeling pretty low when I left that day because I knew we weren't going to legislate a cure in the kids that I knew in their lifetime. That wasn't going to happen. So the next morning I had breakfast with a friend and he goes, you need a conference. I started laughing. I'm like, I know what a conference costs, and that's not us. You misunderstand how big we are. We are not that big. I do not have that much money in the MIB bank account. And he goes, yeah, but you're the one to do it. And so I dismissed him and went back to we had an emailed the group, and I said, hey, if there were an osteosarcoma conference, would you come? And everybody's like, yes, like absolutely, yes, please have a conference. I was like, okay. And I've actually spent the summer in Copenhagen with my sister. So I kind of really left it all behind and checked my email one day and started to get abstracts from doctors all over the country going, hey, so you're having here's what I want to talk about. So this was like in June. By August, I had 16 and really exciting stuff. Like I was excited about what I was reading. And I had to email each one of them and say, thank you for sending me this. But listen, if we have a conference, I can't pay for your travel. I can't pay an honorarium. Like I can't do any of this stuff. So I'm not sure this is going to happen. Every single one of those doctors and researchers wrote back and said, you don't need to. We need this conference. If you build it, we will come. So, and then we had several donors come forward, and it just we were having a conference. And to my astonishment, every single year I do the welcome speech, and I look out and I go, thank you for being here. Like it's astonishing. We have 35 speakers each year. These are the big doctors, researchers, collaborators that show up and share what they're working on. And it is inspiring. And one thing I can say about this is, even though I am astonished by it, every single year that they show up and they meaningfully contribute and collaborate with each other, I knew they would. I knew they would. And I also know as a patient, hearing the moms of the other patients going, these doctors, like, they're just all siloed. And I kept thinking, I don't think so. I don't think that's the case. I think it's like any business where, I don't say you're a restaurant and the restaurant next door is really busy and they're doing great. And you want to pick up the phone and go, hey, what are you doing over there that, like, you're doing so great? Like, of course they would hang up on you if you didn't know them. But if you broke bread with them, if you hung out with them and had a nice glass of wine with them and knew them and went face to face with them, then you would have built a rapport. You would have built a relationship. So you could pick up the phone and go, hey, listen, I've got this patient. I'm not sure what road to take. What do you think? But you have to have that relationship first, which that's, I think, the superpower, the magic, the secret sauce of the conference is we feed everybody really well. We have really good food. We have really good wine. It's in a beautiful place. And we get to, like, hang out with each other and hear what each other's working on. But when the real collaboration, where the real magic happens, is sitting down to lunch together and dinner together and, walking around the conference together and playing games with the kids. And we do all of those things.
It's really great to hear the community responded to you and, in full force. What you just said speaks to the importance of getting, together in person as opposed to the virtual world that we've we're forced into there for a while. So tell me, you must have seen a lot then over these years now of exciting science. What gives you hope?
What doesn't give me hope? I'm I'll tell you something. One thing that you'll maybe appreciate at the conference this year, we were at the end of the conference, and this was our fifth factor conference. And Ryan Roberts said, I think we're at the point where we have more clinical trials for osteosarcoma than we have patients. What? I mean, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, because we missed a year for COVID, but that I still don't even know what to say to that, because the first year we did this, we certainly didn't have. And that was one of the things that made me go, okay, we need to have a conference. I remember going to medical conferences post my own treatment and looking up on the chart of, pediatric oncology and going, rhabdomyosarcoma, we have, 18 sample size. We have 24 for neuroblastoma. We have, kind of going down the list. And then this itty bitty, almost, you can't see it, line for osteosarcoma, a sample size of 3 to 5. That's not a sample size. Like, we need to get our act together here. And that's not the fault of the doctor. That's not anybody's fault. We just need to get together and tell each other what we need to move this thing forward. That's the only way through. Not one of us in any of the communities holds the key to unlock this disease. It's not one of us. It's all of us. It's all of us. So getting together, that gives me hope, because when you get together, you see people laughing together and talking together and collaborating together and sharing wholeheartedly. Nobody's going, well, listen, I'd like to tell you, but I don't think I can because I'm about to write a paper. Like, I've never once seen that sort of thing. It's been wholehearted co-contributing and collaborating, and that's amazing. And there's one other part to it, because I'm talking a lot about the doctors and the researchers, but when you have the patient families in the same room hearing the research, what's happened is they go, the patient family will approach that PI and go, what do you need? What do you need to do this? So from that conference, from that moment of hearing what they're working on, somebody gets inspired. In this case, many people get inspired to say, I'm going to fund that guy, or I'm going to fund that research, or I'm going to fund that PI. And that's meaningfully moved the field forward because we know better, we do better, all of us, but it is an all-in thing.
Those are some great messages and really speaks to the power of collaboration and of bread and wine, I guess. So
absolutely.
Secret sauces. Donna, we're pushing up against time. Do you have any last questions or comments?
No, I just appreciate, Anne, what your vision was to begin with, even if it wasn't, if it was a suggestion offhand, but also how it's evolving. And I think that's very exciting what you're doing. I completely resonate. I mean, every word you said, it completely resonates about, uniting these forces for good, right? So anyway, I just really, really appreciate it. Keep up the good work, Anne. And I'm hoping very much that some other of the disease groups are paying attention and see the possibilities that
I have to say they are. And I've talked to quite a few of them who go, how do you do this? And they come to our conference and they ask, how do you do this? And we're an open book. We want no child should be suffering from cancer because we have intellectual property we want to hang on to. That's not. So if anybody wants to know how to do this, bring it. We're happy to help anybody who is trying to make it better. We call it the conspiracy for good.
Good. I like that.
I love it. Yeah, I love it. Is there anything before we close that you are looking forward to in the future or hoping to do differently or add to what you're doing?
We've really started to meaningfully engage with pharma lately. And we have one of the things I'm really excited about and have been since we started it 3 years ago is our junior advisory board. Because we're a pediatric AYA cancer, it occurred to me at one point, listen, we've got to have the input of our constituents, and this is a voice that we don't hear very often, right? You don't hear the patient voice. You hear the parent, you hear the physician, you hear the researcher. We need to hear more from the young adults, and they have a lot to say. So in addition to our weekly webinar and podcast featuring osteosarcoma research, innovation, and hope, we now have a young adult podcast that I do not show up on. Adults do not show up. They have to be explicitly invited. And it's run by our junior advisory board. And they talk about things that are important to young adults, like dating, intimacy, friends, integrating back into school. What do you wish you would have known? What did you hate to hear? Things that for me, if I were the parent of a child with pediatric cancer, and it's not just for osteosarcoma, it's for all pediatric cancers, to hear what my child was thinking about and worried about, that's a pretty, I call it lifting the iron curtain. It's just, you get a peek behind what are they really thinking about? So that's really brilliant. And because we have this built-in community of the junior advisory board, this is now, I think, something that pharma companies are finding valuable. How do we reach, it's not so much how do we reach this specific community, but how do we talk about this clinical trial? How do we engage with them to make sure that this is a good fit? We're not putting a big suit on a small kid. We're fitting the suit to the kid. So that's been really empowering for the young adults who have survived or who are in treatment or have a sibling who passed from this disease. That's a really empowering thing to be able to talk about it and help improve the state of affairs for the next generation or the next kid diagnosed even. It's very empowering, and it is making it better. And everybody can do it.
Yeah, I love it. And you're a great communicator. I love your use of metaphors. Obviously, you've got a fantastic program going, and I assume if anybody wants more information, they could just go to their website or
Yeah, of course.
yeah,
or they can email me too.
Fantastic, and that's available on your website.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, I think that's great. I think we need to wrap it up just for time's sake. We, even though we could keep talking and talking and talking. So thank you, Anne, so much for being here. Appreciate it, and thank you, Donna, for co-hosting. Thanks to the team at Solving Kids Cancer, a nonprofit charity dedicated to improving survival through creating novel treatment options for children. Remember, the more we learn and communicate, share ideas, and work together, the faster we'll reach the day when all childhood cancer is preventable or curable. As always, keep up the fight, and thanks for listening to This Week in Pediatric Oncology.
We welcome your comments, questions, or thoughts on topics for future episodes. Just drop us a note at TWiPO@solvingkidscancer.org. You can follow Dr. Cripe on Twitter at KidsOncDoc. Send an email to Dr. Weigel at weige007@umn.edu, and find all TWiPO episodes at solvingkidscancer.org.